Hello, this is a recording for the uh, product render assignment that I have for my class. I've got one more shot to do for this demo rubber duck, so I figured I'd record it and kind of just go through the process from start to finish. Just as a reminder and to show you where all the settings are for the look that you want to get. So I've got my scene in here. This is all based off the base file that I gave you. I have a rubber duck as my object. You can have whatever you want. I've thrown in a little table as well if you want to use that. And I've got a curve wall. We've got some lights. We've got a reflector and an absorber. I'm definitely going to be using the reflector for this one. For this final shot, I want this to be kind of like my hero shot where the product is in full view completely. And I'm gonna reference some of these like fun soda pop commercials. I've got a couple references up off the side. Let me see if I can get those to show up. Yeah. So kind of these like poppy commercials with this like bright pink background. I like this one with the colorful blocks that they're on, so I might do something like that. Maybe there's like 3 ducks, each on their own little pedestal. So we'll see what we got here. But first I'll take a little tour around just to get you familiar in how I've set this scene up. For the world settings, I've set the color to black because I don't want any outside light in here. I'm treating this like a studio, and whenever I'm lighting a scene, I like this for like a product, I do like to treat it like a physical space. So I've scaled everything down to the size it's supposed to be. Each grid mark is about 1 meter. So this rubber duck is smaller than that, which makes my camera a bit big, but you can always scale the camera down. So just kind of imagining that I have all of these things on tripods, or I have them on a grid kind of set up, or a stand or some kind. And then all of my camera settings, you can go into your camera once it's selected for the data. I just have it on the default right now, but we can always change the lens size if we want a wider lens or shorter lens. I might transition for this shot from going from a shorter lens to a wider one just to make the duck look a little bigger as I zoom in. For my lights, we've also got light settings once you have that selected. This is an older version of Blender, so I think the newer Blender has, this might be a bit different, but I've set it up with the black body temperature settings, just to make it a little more realistic to work with, but you don't have to use those settings. And for the most part, I'm just going to be using an area light, and I'm not sure how many I'll need, but probably no more than 3. We'll see if we can get away with 1. There's definitely some tricks we can do to accomplish that, but I have a feeling I'm going to need to flood the scene with light if I'm going to get the look that I want from those soda commercials. And then I've got a spotlight up here too. I'll keep that around for now. I might end up deleting it later, but we'll keep it there. Up at the top, we can preview our scene in the wireframe, the solid view, this Eevee preview mode, which works in real time, although it is not the most accurate representation of my lighting. It does give me an approximation of where all the lights are hitting, so this is a nice view to work in when I'm just kind of setting up lights and just sort of figuring it out. And then for the final render, I'm going to be using cycles. I have it set to GPU complete because I want to use my GPU and my CPU. And you can preview that up here with this final circle. So this is what my lighting will look like when I render it. It'll probably take some time to render. You can see it's counting the samples here. And if you move around, it will kind of smudge and smear until it settles. Or it might pixelate till it settles if you don't have denoise on. So this will be nice for once I get further along in the process. For now, I'm just going to keep it either shaded or just in preview mode until I know what I want. For materials, that's going to be up in the shading tab. So I have here it is. I have a curve wall material here. And because I'm going for that bright poppy color, I'm just going to change the base color to be like a nice bright pink. I'll go into my camera just to kind of see how that's playing out. That's looking pretty good. Maybe a little brighter. I think maybe more of a reddish pink would be good. I think that'll help bring out the duck a little more. For this pillar, over in the modifier settings, this little wrench, I do have settings for the amount of sides I want the pillar to have, so I think I want to go with a four-sided. And we can also set the amount of beveling. That we want. So I want just a slight bevel. Maybe even less than that. Yeah. And when I made this, I also did make a mistake. So if you want to apply a material to your object here, I don't think it'll let you do it by default. Maybe we can try. No. Okay. That's fine. If you go into the Geometry Nodes tab, you can see how I've actually set this up. All you have to do is add a material. It's called a set material. And then for that material, I wanted to have my pillar material. And you can also plug this into the bottom of this input. That way it'll show up over here if you want. But as long as you add a set material and then tell it which one you want, that'll be fine. And now you can see the color change that I added has now applied. I'm actually going to make this red just because I'm sort of loosely referencing off to the side on my reference. And I'll also make the pillar a little thinner just so the duck stands out on it. A little wider than that. And that seems pretty good. So I'll do that. And then with that pillar selected, I'll go into my layout and I'm going to just add some other pillars around it. Remember that we can use our gimbal up top to rotate it around our scene, and you can also click on certain angles to get just the right view that you want. So I'll add some of those. And for this one, I want my height to be a bit higher. Like a duck higher, and then this one I'm going to make like half a duck higher. So we get that sort of three-tiered effect. I'll go in and I will assign it some different materials. Again, I'm just referencing my Google search off to the side just for this demo. Maybe I'll do this one in blue. Or like a yellowy orange. Or maybe that blends in too much with the duck. Maybe this one could be a bit more red. Very nice. And of course, we can copy and paste our duck. And I'm just switching between layout and my other one. And I'll get these lined up onto their stands properly. Remember, you can focus onto an object using the period key on your number pad. You can also change that shortcut in the settings. I don't always like it as that one. Sometimes I set it to be the comma key. And this one's a little sunken in too. That's looking a little better. Let's get these at proper angles. Just so I can see what I'm doing. So something like that. And we're definitely going to move the camera a little closer. So something like that will be our product shot. All right, let's move on to lighting. So I'm going to change this to my final lighting preview. You can see it's already looking a bit better. And for this particular shot, I'm going to use my reflector over here. You can make a reflector just by adding a mesh plane and making it white. And I'm just going to add it over here to the side of my set, and I'm going to expand it a bit. So basically imagine I just went to the store and I bought a big piece of poster board. That's pretty much all this is. And grab another one. And we'll rotate that around as well. So I'm basically creating a little box to bounce light around with, and also to pick up on reflections, because remember, even though this duck is not glass or a mirror finish or anything or metal, it's still going to pick up on the reflections of what's around it. So for dramatic shots like an Apple iPhone video, if you have it kind of in a black void, that's kind of intentional to hide it, to create mystery. But if you have something that's out in the open like this, we want to be able to see the product. And I think I'm going to change this top light to an area light. Oh, yeah. And a setting like this, a setup like this is not uncommon for a physical product shoot. Just going to turn the power on that down for now. And then I'm going to turn off my other lights. And that's something that I highly encourage for lighting, is definitely playing around with the playing around with your setup. Gonna figure out what's gonna work. Because for me personally, I like to work by turning off all the lights except for the one that I'm working with. Another little trick we can do is we can add another reflector over here and just place it behind the camera. And that way it'll bounce light back onto the front of our object as well. So even though this is not ever going to be visible, it's still going to be extremely useful for us. You can see I'm not going for like precise angles or anything. I'm just trying to bounce light around. And already, just with one light, look how bright that is. In fact, it's so bright I might even turn this headlight above us down. And I'll also label as I go just to make sure I know where everything's at. So this is just a 1 meter light. The bigger your light source, the softer your shadows will be. So I don't want super hard shadows for mine, so I'm going to leave it there. I might even go like 0.5, just see how that looks. Just so we can see the comparison. So there's 0.5. Here's 1. Very, very subtle. This shadow right here is just a little bit lighter. And it's a little bit more of a gradient on the sides here. So I think I'll leave it at that, but I'm definitely going to turn it down, because I don't need that much flooding the scene. So 10's a little dim. Let's try 20. Still a little dim. Let's try 25. I think that's pretty good. Again, I haven't added any of my main lights to like highlight reflections. I haven't added a backlight yet, so I'm still leaving myself some room, and we can always come back to this. Also looking at my material for my backdrop, I might come back to the shading tab, and I might turn my roughness up a bit, because you can see when I turn the roughness down, I get this bright highlight behind, and I don't really want that for this shot. I want it to be pretty uniform. I'm fine with it being a little brighter around the ducks. In fact, that's actually helping highlight and pull the focus on my ducks. But I don't want it to distract from anything, so actually I might go just a little bit further. Maybe like 0.6. So this would be the difference of like using a matte finish paper versus a glossy finish paper for my backdrop. So for this one, I want more of a matte finish, kind of like what I have on my blocks here. Okay, so I've got that. I'm going to turn back on my area light. And to mimic my reference point, I'm going to move my area light over here. Sometimes it's nice to flip back into one of these other modes, just so that I can see what I'm doing. And again, I'm thinking about how I'm placing this light in the scene. Maybe if I'm treating this like a physical space, maybe I need to move my reflector walls off to the side a little bit just to give myself some room. And I'll point it up here. So imagining this is on a tripod, I'm sort of placing it off to the side and above where my camera is at. I'm placing it sort of at this corner here. And as far as like proximity to my subject, remember that light fall off is exponential. So if you move a light twice as far away, your subject is not going to be twice as dim, it's going to be 4 times as dim. Same thing the other way. If I move my light twice as close, my subject is not going to be 4 times brighter. It's going to be, or sorry, my subject is not going to be doubly brighter. It's going to be 4 times brighter. There is a point where that sort of falls off, and that's where like sunlight comes in because it's so bright and so far away that any minor changes aren't really going to make a difference. So we'll see what that looks like. And I'm going to turn off my backlight just so that I can focus on my area light here. I'll call this my main light. And we'll play around because I do want to have some shadow play in here. I want this side of the stand to be brighter than this side. But I also don't want too dark of a shadow. I'm also thinking about how big that light is, so if I want to soften those shadows, we can make my light a little bit bigger. And I'm not really liking this shadow, so I actually might move my light. So kind of looking at it from above again, I might angle my light a little bit more and place it like just behind the camera. Let's see where that gets us. Yeah, that's hiding the shadow a little bit better. Something else I can do to sort of help hide that shadow is do a little bit of camera trickery. So I can actually push this a little further back, and maybe I'll push this one a little further back. And then with my camera selected, we can start playing around with the focal length as well. And just sort of lining up that shot. In fact, I might want to have it just a little below. Be angled up just a little bit. Like we're looking up at the duck. So we're still getting that tiered effect that I like. That's the main light. Let's turn on the top and the main light just to see where we're at overall. So I might have to turn down and kind of balance these two. So whereas before where we were only dealing with the one light, now I might be fine. I also might move this reflector away just a little bit, just to make the shadows on that side a little darker. So still reflecting light, but I'm taking away a little bit. Yeah, I'm liking that. Because what I want is for this side of the cube to have a distinct side to it. Same over here. And I'm going to add another light as well. I'm going to have this be my rim light, and I'm going to move it all the way back. Point it up. I don't think it's going to be an area light. I might just have it be a point light so that it illuminates the ducks and the background. We'll see how that does. Okay, so after some tweaking, I decided to go with more of a highlight on the background as opposed to a rim light. So kind of highlighting the ducks back there. We've got our main, and we've got our top light, just sort of filling everything else in. And I've got it close to what I want. It's not quite there color-wise, but that's all stuff that I can do in post. As long as the general lighting is pretty close to what I want, then that'll be fine. So now I'm going to look into animation. What do I want these ducks to do? And what do I want my camera to do? I think I want to try and have them sort of just spin up into existence. Very fun style. So I'm going to... I think it's going to be a pretty quick shot. It's going at 24 frames per second. I'm thinking like maybe half a second of just nothing. And then the camera can kind of zoom in as they're appearing. The nice thing about Blender when you're dealing with values is that it actually can do math within here. So if I know that I want this duck to spin 5 times, maybe we could try that. I actually can just type in 360 times 5 and then minus where it's already at. Which in here, now he's spinning really, really fast. That's very fun. I also want to preserve the scale of my model there. I'm going to have it start off small, so I'll go back here. You can also select multiple values here. If I bring this to 0, it'll do that for all of them. Make sure that you key all of those as well, if it's yellow. So now he is spinning. And that actually might be a bit too slow, so I'm going to bring that in just by moving the keys around. So it's very, very fast. There should be motion blur on by default. Or no, it's not on by default. Here we go. Over in your render properties, we can turn on motion blur if we have anything fast moving. And you can have control over that. I'm going to see what that looks like just by rendering it. So I'll just render this image. We'll see how the motion blur looks. If I spin it fast enough, it should be good. Oh yeah, there we go. Definitely looking pretty blurry to me. I might even have him go even a little bit faster. So he's going to spin 6 times. And that'll be good. And I can do the same thing with these ducks. I'll key them on the same one. Come over to this key. And for the spin, it's at negative 43 right now, so we're going to do 360 times 6, because we like the way that that looked, and then minus where it's at. Which ideally should look the same. I also want to key my scale, and we'll fix the scale afterward. For this one, it's a positive value, so I'm going to do 360 times 6 plus the value that it's at. Should look exactly the same. Key my scale as well for that object. And we'll head back to frame 12. Set that to 0. Make sure that it's keyed. Same thing with this guy. I'm going to set that to 0. Make sure that's keyed. You can also turn on auto keying here if you want. Sometimes that can be detrimental to what you're trying to do. Perfect. And I'm actually going to stagger these for where they're going to start. So if this one is starting on frame 12, we can get our master controls here. So we've got our 3 rubber ducks. And for this rubber duck, I'm also going to go into my animation tab. And if you get a graph editor showing, there we go. We can actually see what this looks like. And I think for each of these rubber ducks, so what I want is the because location's not doing anything. This one's not doing anything. This one's not doing anything. Not going to worry about scale right now, but for the rotation, here's that rotation curve. Right now we have a default ease. I think I want it to go really fast to begin with, and then really ease out toward the end. Something like that. Yeah, I like that. And I might even do the same thing with my scale. So I'm grabbing all of these on the scale. X, Y, and Z, doing a similar thing. Just getting a really dramatic curve. So it's going to start out really fast. It's going to appear. You can see it off to the side there. You can see the comparison too from that middle one that I'm on right now. So, same timing, different curve. And I'll do the same thing with my other ducks. I like how that looks. So I didn't do anything with location, I'm just going to hide those. Honestly, we can just grab all of them at the same time. And of course the last duck, same thing. I'm looking through the values that I actually need. So the only ones that I animated. And I'm just going to adjust these curves to get the motion that I want. All those math classes that you had in the past, reading graphs, this is why we did it. So, start out fast, we're going to just ease into that one. Very silly. Now let's look at our camera. For camera movements, similar thing. I'm actually going to start it kind of right at the beginning. I'm going to key my camera at the beginning there. I'm also going to key my focal length after the fact. So we'll start it where it's at. And we'll bring it down. Try like a 35mm lens. See what that does for us. Fantastic. I might even go more than that, just to get an even more dramatic duck. We'll key this for now. Yeah, let's try 20mm. Looks like we might be clipping into our pedestal a little bit, so let's move up so that we're not doing that. There we go. Make sure that those are all keyed. So I'm going to switch over out of the final preview mode. I'm just going to bring it to that EV preview. just because I think it'll load a bit faster. I can see it in more real time. So you can see I am clipping through the pillar there, but if I go frame by frame, you can see that it's actually just out of camera view. So as long as what's in camera is fine, it doesn't really matter if you're clipping through or not. I'm also realizing that my backdrop is a little too short, so I'm going to scale that out just enough that the edges are going to be in camera. So I'll just keep looking at this box. And I'm going to key our camera again as well. I'm just sort of improvising this on the spot. I'm going to have it do kind of a pan up, because I think that would look nice. And I am getting a little bit of clipping on that. I might be able to adjust that in the camera as well. Yeah, there we go. So in your camera settings, you can adjust when clipping begins. If I bring that down, that should fix that issue. So just kind of working around with the keyframes, seeing what I like. And then for this upward motion here, I definitely want to have more of an ease at the beginning of that. And more of an ease at the end, so a little bit more dramatic. And then here I can put my logo or something. And I think that'll work quite nice. So here's my final shot. Zooming in, we've got our ducks revealing dramatically. We've got a nice wide angle. And then we'll do a pan up. Okay, so I have my shot. I have it animated the way I like. I have it lit the way I like. Let's go into the export settings. First, I want to go into this view layer. Looks like a stack of images. This is our render passes. I definitely want to have combined. I want to have my Z and mist. Probably won't use those, but we can still have them. Ambient occlusion for sure. And then for the crypto matte, definitely object and material. And we can do a test render. Okay, so render has completed. Here is the combined pass. We can access all the other ones over here. So there's a depth, there's a mist. Here's our ambient occlusion. So I'm pretty happy with that. For the export settings, I got to make sure you're on cycles, make sure it's on GPU complete. Everything else in here should be fine. If you want to turn motion blur on, you can. For the output, we want to do 1920 by 1080, 24 FPS. We want to make sure that our frame range is trimmed to what we need, so that we're not exporting more than necessary. I'm just going to bring mine to 70. So that's pretty much the end of my shot. For the output, we want to make sure that we save it somewhere, that we're going to find it. So I'm going to put it into my external for this class. Here's my render folder. And we can create a new folder right in here. I'll call this Duck Hero, because this is the hero shot. So it's going to go into that folder. For the file format, we want to have it as EXR multi-layer. That will ensure that it saves all of those different render passes that we wanted to give it. That all should be fine. Make sure you save, as always. Another thing I would suggest before doing the final render, in your viewport in your actual Blender scene, change it to this block view, just so that it's not rendering your viewport and your final at the same time, because that can get kind of messy. And then we can just hit render animation, and it will go through all of your frames and put it in that folder for you. Okay, once the render is done, you should get a series of images. If you have it into a folder like this one, you should get a series of EXR images, each one for the frames in your animation. And we're just going to bring those into After Effects. So I've already done some work on this just so you can see what it looks like at the end. You can see I've got my ducks, I've got some graphics behind there, and I've got some text. So I'm going to show you how I did that, and then I'm going to throw together my shots all in one thing. So to import an image sequence, we're going to go to File and Import, and we can find our render folder here. So let's just do this hero shot again. You only need to click on the first one, and it should give you an option to open an EXR sequence. What that will do is it's smart enough to know that all of these numbers are frames, so it will grab all the ones in this folder. And we want to import it in as footage, so it'll treat it like a video rather than just one single image. So there is the EXR sequence. You can see by default it's going to bring it in at 30 FPS, but since I animated at 24, I'm going to want to change that. So we can right click on that, and we can interpret footage main, type in 24, and now it is at 24 FPS. And then from here, we can right-click on our shot, and we can create a comp from that selection so that we have a composition that's exactly the same length as our shot. And you'll notice, as I scrub through the timeline, this is completely black, and that is because we have not told it which layer in our EXR file to view, because we have multiple layers. So in your effects, you can search for what's called an extractor. Cheekily, they've named it extractor with capital E, X, and R because that's what it's for. And with that on here, we can select which layer that we want. Usually you'll want a combined layer. And now you can see I have my ducks all in a row. But you can access all these different layers. So if I copy this, copy paste, on this top one, we can cycle through some of these other ones like ambient occlusion. Ambient occlusion is that shading pass that goes over top of everything, and that just helps define kind of what is underneath. So if we set this to, if you don't have this option, you can go to toggle switches modes. But if we set this to multiply, you can see that we get some shading on top of here. And before I do that, I might want to go in and kind of readjust the lighting on that. So could throw in like a brightness contrast. Basically what multiply does is it will take all of the white values and it'll make them invisible so that only the shadows remain. So I might turn up my brightness and contrast a bit just to help make it stand out. So you can see before is pretty dark, after pretty light, and now if I do multiply, that's looking a lot better. And if you don't want it to be that intense, I don't want it to be this intense, what we can do is just turn down the opacity. Usually I like it somewhere as low as 20, maybe 50%. And we're just adding a little bit of definition to everything. So maybe a little lower than that. We'll come into our ducks. I think it'll be especially noticeable, yeah, on these ducks. And that's very nice. So I'll turn that off for now. For color correcting your image, you might bring it in and it might look very different from how it did in Blender. That's totally fine. The two that I usually use to get it back to looking normal is the curves effect. This is just black and white values. You can brighten the darks, or you can decrease the brightest highlights. And you can play around with the midtones too. Do you want it to be less saturated, more saturated, brighter or darker? So usually what I will do is I will bring my highlights down. Usually it comes in a little too hot. And then I'll just make sort of a gentle curve. You can see before and after. It's actually not too bad. I might not have to bring it down that far. And I might even do the curve slightly over the middle. Or maybe just below. And you can play around with it with your own settings to get what you want. I want to make sure that my colors are standing out, but I also don't want it to be too overblown. That's pretty nice. I don't mind that. And here's with that ambient occlusion layer on. The second effect that I like to add is the Lumetri color. Lumetri. And usually just the base correction settings will be enough, especially on the lighting. So if you want more exposure, I probably don't need more exposure on this shot. Contrast. Ooh, I'm liking that. You can see my colors have shifted to be just a little bit more vibrant when I do that. And usually when you're playing with these settings, less is more. Highlights, if your highlights are too bright, you can always bring them down in here. I don't want to bring them down too far, but as you can see, it's affecting the shadow over there. There's also the shadow values, if you want this to be brighter or darker. I might bring my shadows down just a little bit. So before, after, very subtle changes, but you can see, especially in the pink is standing out a lot more. General white values, black values. Again, we don't want to ruin the image. So like if I bring this down way too far, you can see I've lost detail. We don't want to lose detail. We just want to enhance what's already there. I don't mind the white values being a little lower. We can also increase the saturation. It's already pretty saturated, but I want mine to be very vibrant, very poppy. I don't think I need to touch exposure for this particular shot. Again, that might be a little obnoxiously loud, but that's okay. So that's sort of my process. Here's my shot that I did before. Actually, I kind of like the new one that I did more. I might just copy those settings in. Another layer we can add, if I copy paste that, and just get rid of some of these settings. Change that back to normal. Some of the other ones we've got these crypto materials. Should make sure that my transparency is up. I'm just looking for the ones that are going to help me. Sometimes these work, sometimes they don't. Here's a depth pass. Here's a mist pass. And the mist pass is actually working pretty well. I think that's what I used when I was doing this before. But you can use these as sort of masks for stuff behind. So again, we can add a brightness contrast here. Increase our brightness, increase our contrast, just to get a better mask around there, just so that we get that nice hard edge. And with this, we can use it as a mask for graphics behind, which is what I did for that shape. So it could be anything. I could add text in here. Ducks. If I wanted that to be behind my ducks, I could tell that layer, I want you to follow this and be a Luma matte. We can inverse it as well if we only want it to be on the ducks. So now if I move my text around, it should be perfectly masked to what's behind here. So if I wanted it to kind of like pop up behind them as the camera zooms in, and maybe it follows with them down or something like that. And that way you don't have to do any masking by hand. So I'm actually going to take my curves and settings from here, bring it to the one that I was playing with before. I actually like that as my base better. Excellent. So here's the one that I took a little bit more time with. I've got sort of a shape layer being animated behind. It's got some effects on it. It zooms down, we go up with the camera, and we've got our ducks label with all the effects that I want on it. So there is a shot, and I recommend you do your shots like this, because then you can come into a final comp, which you can do by just going to your project, making a new composition, make sure that it is the setting that you want. So in this case, I wanted it to be 1920 by 1080, 24 FPS, and you can just call it final comp. Give it a duration, like 30, 40 seconds, just so you have room to work with. You can always trim it later. But from here, if you have a shot, you can just drag it in to the editor here. And it looks like I need to make my final comp a bit longer. And super easy. I'll just make it 30 seconds longer. So now I have my shot 1. Shot 2 and 3. I'll delete the demo ones from now. You can just repeat this process. So I'll do another one real quick. We'll import from here. Let's do the duck reveal shot. Here's my first frame, EXR sequence footage. Interpret main. Want to make sure that it's at 24. Make a new comp. And we can just grab those extractor effects. So I might actually just go in here and find my curves, extractor, Lumetri, and just copy and paste it into here. There's my lovely duck. I'll turn these off for now. But you can see I have my shot, and I can just go through the same process if I wanted to put text behind here. I'm sure that there is a there we go. So I could use that. We could just turn the brightness and contrast up to make that one work. Oh, the mist pass is actually much better. So yeah, and we just use that as the mask for putting anything behind there. So if I wanted to have words, or if I wanted to have some sort of like effect behind it, that would not be a problem. Then once you have your final shots, you can throw them into the final comp. You can add your music in there. You can trim it down to what you need. And you'll have yourself a lovely product video.